This show is supported by Odoo. When you buy business software from lots of vendors, the costs add up and it gets complicated and confusing. Odoo solves this. It's a single company that sells a suite of enterprise apps that handles everything from accounting to inventory to sales. Odoo is all connected on a single platform in a simple and affordable way. You can save money without missing out on the features you need. Check out Odoo at odoo.com. That's odoo.com.
I grew up listening to a lot of Ethiopian traditional music, usually via old cassette tapes that my parents would play in the car. You know, the kind where the sound warps or gets slow from when splashes of coffee would drip and dry on the magnetic tape. It was a vibe. And until I was an adult, Ethiopian music was, in my mind, kind of stuck in the past, glued to the tapes themselves. It happens to a lot of diaspora kids, where your version of culture is more like a snapshot of how things used to be in your source country. So imagine my surprise when I started going to Ethiopia as a grown woman and collaborating with musicians there, including many traditional ones. Working with those Asmari artists was a revelation because these musicians were some of the most experimental folks that I knew. On a Monday, I would hear Kirar meets punk. Tuesday, metal meets masenko. Wednesday, singer-songwriter, aka me, together with the kabero drum. You name the genre, Ethiopian traditional musicians were ready to find a way to make a new sound together. Choice between tradition and innovation? Nah, no such thing. It set up a lifelong curiosity in me to find artists who refuse to choose between tradition and innovation, and to understand the exact recipe of how they walk this sonic path. When I found the music of Cimafunk, I was instantly ready to dance to his version of this exploration. My name is Maklit, and this is Movement, Music and Migration Remixed. The day Cimafunk landed in Bogota, Colombia, he made local news. "The Cuban James Brown has arrived," read the headline. It was February 2019, and Cimafunk and his band were there to play their very first show outside of their native country, Cuba. But there was one other reason for the trip to Colombia. After bringing the house down in Bogota, they had a whole U.S. tour in mind. Cimafunk and all 8 of his band members had visa appointments at the U.S. consulate there. For the last 2 years, the U.S. Embassy in Havana had suspended all visa proceedings, so their best shot at getting to the U.S. was by way of Colombia. Thankfully, their visas were granted, and the band took off on a whirlwind tour across the U.S. 30 performances, 50 days in 16 cities. One of their first stops was in New Orleans, and the moment Cimafunk stepped foot in the city, he was hit with an experience he'd never had before.
I was walking in the street in the Mardi Gras. I was walking with more than 5,000 black people. Never in our life we was doing like that. So looks real, but it was like that. And it was at some point that part of people that was working with me from my team in Cuba, they was feeling uncomfortable. Like a
Why?
black friend of mine, because we don't see that in Cuba. You don't see so many black people jamming in the street and grooving. You don't see that.
Was it like a fear?
It wasn't a fear. It was like a being aware, because
Right.
Culturally we got a lot of prejudice. And we never was around so many feeling
Right.
that energy. And then we was there
Yes.
like, hey, yo, man, Oof, this is good.
Although Mardi Gras was unlike anything Cimafunk had ever seen, New Orleans reminded him powerfully of his hometown in Cuba.
I grew up in Pinar del Rio. That's the occidental part of Cuba.
Pinar del Rio is west of Havana and famous for its tropical fields where the best tobacco on the island is grown. The landscape looks prehistoric with steep limestone hills, green valleys, and red soil. And as you get closer to the region's urban center where Cimafunk grew up, tobacco curing barns turn into pastel-colored houses and colonial-style buildings. In town, there's a century-old cigar factory where premium cigars are hand-rolled. Down the street sits one of Latin America's first theaters, and just around the corner is Cimafunk's childhood home. Cimafunk was born Eric Iglesias Rodriguez. Growing up in Western Cuba in the 90s and early 2000s, he remembers music always playing from somewhere. Walking through the neighborhood was like flipping through radio stations. One minute he'd hear reggaeton blaring from an old car stereo, and on the next block, classic Cuban Nueva Trova spilled out of the local club. And the music didn't stop when he got home.
Everybody was musical in my family. Everybody could like a jam and groove, and everybody was in the groove.
Eric was raised by his grandmother, the matriarch of his tight-knit extended family. He says her home was the place to be on the weekends.
Every Saturday and Sunday, all the family have to go to the grandma house, and there everybody eat and stuff. And I remember that always was music on all the time. It was a lot of salsa music, was a lot of Afro-Cuban sound, Bob Marley. My uncle also was giving me cassettes of Lionel Richie, Michael, all these people, and I was listening to music all the time in the car, in all car that they got. And yeah, it was the best part was jamming with the family that times.
Along with Lionel Richie and Michael Jackson, his family made sure his taste included all the Cuban greats.
They was telling me stories about Irakere and Chucho Valdez. Oh, this is the gold, yeah, because the best piano. And then Omara Portondo with Buena Vista Omara, she's the queen and stuff. And all the appreciation and the admiration for the legends in my family was always super important. They always elevate the Cuban musicians.
And while music education was a natural part of life with his grandmother, what she encouraged most was securing a stable profession through education.
My auntie, she's surgeon. My aunt is engineer. My mom is work in mental health. And everybody is like, my cousin is also surgeon. Like everybody was in the professional environment. So it was like, yes, we grew up and we focus on being smart and figure it out and do professional stuff.
Following in the footsteps of his relatives, Eric decided on a career in medicine. But after 2 tedious years in medical school, he knew it wasn't for him.
Finally, I tell to the family, like, I'm going to be a bad doctor. So they say, like, no, better leave. You better leave. We don't want no mediocrity in the family.
Wow. That's an amazing journey, because it's like you described your grandmother's house as being the center of the music when you were growing up, like when you were young. But then she was also the kind of push for you to do this other thing. But then in the end, your family was with you. They were supportive of you.
Yeah, all the time.
With the blessing of his family, he moved to Havana to find his footing as a musician.
I didn't have a physical place of my own there, so I was living with family. I started to figure out for making some money, and I'm working in cars, shops and stuff for 2 years. And I remember that one day I was just exhausted of that type of thing, and I was like, I already have been 2 years here, I didn't know nobody in the street, no musician, no producer, nobody. I was no farandula, as we say. And then I said, like, yo, I gotta figure it out.
He remembered a musician from his hometown named Raúl Paz rose to fame in France and then moved to Havana. They didn't know each other personally, but Eric thought someone in Pinar del Rio might. Eric asked around, and sure enough, someone told him the neighborhood Raúl lived in. With a vague idea of where to look, Eric went back to Havana to try his luck.
So I finished the work one day at 5 p.m. and I was working, just finding that place. And I found the building and I asked to an old lady. Old ladies, they always the best. Because that old lady, I asked her what this guy that he was really famous was living, and she told me, "Oh yeah, he's living in this building in the penthouse, but you can in for the garage. So it's a small door here. Just get in for the garage and go up straight to his house." And like, yo, that's perfect. And like, thank you. She gave me the entrance of a super expensive building to the penthouse of this guy, and I knocked the door. And he opened the door and he was like, yeah. And I'm like, yo, man, I'm from your hometown too. I'm a friend of a friend. And I want to do some music. I just don't know nobody. Maybe you can help me. And the guy's like, hey, just come to the studio. So he took me to the studio, give me the guitar. I sing a couple of songs. And then he told me, like, okay, you can do choir from me in a show, big show that he was doing in TV, live, transmitting on live in Cuba, in France and stuff. And the day of the show, I was with... Everybody was on black because it was a really expensive and super classic theater. I was dressed like, as you say here, as a pimp. Big glasses like that, and my shirt was really small and tight. It was a pant from my sister, really, really tight, and some shiny shoes.
And how did you decide to dress like that? Like, where did you say, I want to be noticed, or were you just being yourself?
No, part of the truth is that most of the time I didn't have no other clothes to wear. So many of the clothes at that time was a friend of mine, a boyfriend of my sister. I already loved the bell-bottom pants since I was in my hometown, but I didn't have none. So this friend of mine have a couple of that one because they was hippie, was like a hippie musicians.
On live TV, Eric stole the show in his bell-bottoms and big glasses. And then he started to get recognized in public.
They put the show, that concert, every time in TV for a whole year. So everybody was watching me and everybody was like, who is this guy? Who is this guy? Who is this guy? And people start to tell me that in the street. So I take that as an advantage and I start to ask for more work, making more choirs, background vocals, and record vocal for other artists. And I just take that moment and...
It's also like every step you took towards music took 10 steps towards you.
Yeah. It's just, music is a gift, and if you just go for it, she's gonna reward you. You know, she's gonna give you back what you give to that state of mind.
Not long after that first TV performance, Eric was invited to join the Cuban collective Interactivo, led by jazz pianist Roberto Carcassés. With Interactivo, Eric mastered the art of improvisation, performing alongside a rotating cast of musicians who fused traditional Afro-Cuban rhythms with funk, jazz, and soul. During his time with Interactivo, Eric sang lead vocals and developed his composing and songwriting skills. But after 2 years with the group, he got an opportunity he couldn't pass up. A chance to travel outside of Cuba for the first time. He and a few friends booked an 8-month gig on a cruise sailing to Greece and Turkey.
They hire us for sing traditional Cuban music. That's what they hire most of the Cuban musicians for, that type of work.
Instead of sticking to the traditional, Eric and his friends decided to experiment.
They was complaining, the director of the ship, but the clients, they was like, yo, man, we packed the ship in the floor that we was playing, you couldn't cross.
Technically, they weren't hired as the main act, but their performances started attracting bigger crowds than the main shows. People on the cruise couldn't get enough of their take on classic soul and funk. Their unique twist on songs like Easy Like Sunday Morning and Cool in the Gang Celebration got everybody dancing.
We was mixing everything with Cuban music and putting tumbals. I was jamming with all these things, but we put people dance, and I realized that time that if you do dance over music, you gotta figure out people have to dance, and that was the scene. That was the scene there.
In his downtime between shows, Eric took advantage of another opportunity that came with the gig: reliable internet access, something he did not have in Cuba.
When I get internet, the first thing that I did was get into YouTube, and I get obsessed with live shows. So that's the time where I discover all these live shows of Prince in Las Vegas, all the new power generation movement, and then I discovered James Brown, like for real.
The first time he clicked on a video of James Brown, he knew his life had changed forever.
I was like, yo, man, this is the type of life that I want. I just want to feel that groove in that way and just go forward.
Seeing James Brown perform gave him an idea of what was possible, beyond singing backup or writing for other bands. He imagined what leading his own group could look like, but what to call that vision wouldn't come until later. One day, around a year later, when Eric was back in Cuba, he struck up a conversation with the stranger.
This old guy asked me where I came from one day, and I was like, I came from Pinar del Rio, my hometown. I said, no, but where you came from? What is your roots?
Beyond his grandparents' generation, he'd never really thought about his lineage until that conversation. At first, he was upset he didn't have a better answer, but then curiosity took over. He went to the elders in his family and asked them to tell him all they knew of their African roots. He then came across the biography of Esteban Montejo, an Afro-Cuban man born on a sugarcane plantation in the 1860s, 2 decades before slavery was abolished on the island. While still a young man, Esteban escaped enslavement and lived as a maroon or cimarron in the hilly rural areas of Cuba, where he and other cimarrones established independent communities. Esteban lived to be over 100 years old and was the last living cimarron in Cuba when his biography was published in 1966. Learning about this history, Eric knew he had found his artist name, Cimafunk, a fusion of words just like his sound.
Cima is from the Maroons that in Cuba go to live in the deep forest. They was building small communities there, and they was living high in the mountains. But for me, it's like the base of what the music sound and the aesthetic of Afro-Cuban descendants, because they was doing their own thing, and they was living all together. It was new sounds there, was kids was born there, so it was new type of life. So I take Cima from that.
Because your people were cimarrons.
Yeah, from my mom's side, what we know, it was a Maroon, a Cimarron descendants.
It's such a powerful story of freedom, the cimarrons, and of like that independence, like you were saying. It's like renaming yourself that is like a rebirth. Is it like a rebirth?
Oh, yeah, actually, yeah. And it applied to everything. It applied to everything because it's history. So all the stories that people tell me when I was a kid, all the different type of custom of family relationships, I get all this type of thing came from there. You know,
yes.
Once I start to figure it out and know more about it, I was like, okay, yeah, now I know melanin is good.
Melanin is gold.
Yeah, everything start to move forward.
Cuando me miras yo no puedo ni hablar.
In 2017, soon after he decided on the name Cimafunk, Eric came out with his first solo album called Terapia. He self-produced the entire project from his bedroom.
I learned how to produce music in the computer with that album. I didn't know nothing, and that album made me realize that I could keep doing it, and I was ready for show the people what I was thinking,
Mm-hmm.
and that was the opening door for me.
Que no hay amor tan salvaje como el tuyo.
Without the backing of any major label or marketing campaign, Terapia went viral across the island. The music got so popular, Cubans started calling what was happening Fenomeno Cimafunk. A year later, the phenomenon made it to the US. Terapia landed Eric on Billboard's list of top 10 Latin artists to watch. And a couple months later, Cimafunk, which included an 8-piece band, made their US debut at South by Southwest. Terapia is full of danceable songs that fuse Afro-Cuban rhythms like pilon with American funk, influenced by the style Eric developed and honed in Havana. Over the years, he became obsessed with finding the perfect way to translate funk into Spanish.
I was always intrigued how singing funk music in Spanish was so difficult to put the words with flow. You know?
Oh, yeah.
And it was different because it's like getting an American to sing a bolero in English.
Right. It doesn't quite work.
No, because the words have a different pronunciation. So with the funk was the same, and I was like, okay, the one was the one that saved me. Hit it on the one all the time.
Really?
Yeah.
Because Cubans, you mess with the one.
We mess with the one all the time. We call syncopation.
There you go. It was that obsession with getting funk just right in Spanish that led Eric to compose a song with legendary Cuban musicians in mind.
It was a crazy idea that I was trying to put together Omar Apotondo, Pancho Amat, Chucho Valdez, and Laragon. I was trying to put together all these goats, Cuban goats, and make a song of groove and with tradition too.
As it turns out, the idea wasn't so crazy. All the artists agreed to record with Eric for his song El Potaje in 2019. One day, during a recording session, Eric and Tres Master Pancho Amat were bonding over how to combine funk with traditional Afro-Cuban sounds, and Pancho Amat brought up New Orleans.
I didn't know that he knows so much about New Orleans and all this stuff. I didn't know almost nothing about New Orleans.
This was the same year Eric had taken his first trip to New Orleans and fallen in love with what he saw during Mardi Gras. But back in Cuba, with Pancho Amat, he learned how deep the Cuba-New Orleans exchange ran.
And he started to talk with me, and he was like, yeah, man, but you know, the trade was like that, and you can find the same rhythm, the clave cubana, that is the soul, it's most of the soul of the Cuban, that is a ta, 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 ta. That's for us, is like the food, you know, and he was like, it's the same in New Orleans, because the New Orleans groove, when you hear the jazz music, it's a cha, 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 just with the drum. I was using the.
So that conversation was the key to doing funk in Spanish.
I was already doing it. I was already sounding good. But when he started to explain me, I was like, okay, now I understand why it's not easy, because I was not seeing a lot of artists and bands doing funky music in Spanish. And the one that I was seeing, I didn't like most of them for the pronunciation, how they was putting the words on time.
Yes, the
For me, it was
phrasing.
like
It wasn't.
Because in English you can say, I love you, tell me something, ooh baby. And in Spanish is te amo porque tú me dices that. And that in Spanish doesn't sound with flow. That sound
Right.
like
Right. Why do you think that funk and Afro-Cuban music go so well together? What is it about them that makes them like perfect friends?
Blackness,
Hey!
melanin, melanin. Yeah, the melanin. Yeah, it's not. I think that is not other main reason. It's like we came from the same group, and we develop in different stuff, cause transculturation and all the phenomena of immigration and slave trade and stuff. And Cuba was so big potence in terms of impact on cultural movement in the world and before the 50s. And we was crashing New York in the 20s with Machito and the Afro-Cuban, with Mario Bauza, and I was like a friend of DC with all this movement in the 20s. Impact so much the American sound that get into the funky, you know. The
Amazing.
Afro-Cuban is inside the funky, like a really, really there. The tempos in the soul, in the expression and in the move. And when you hit the groove, there is the Afro-Cuban is there. Marvin Gaye songs and James Brown songs, all of them was in Funkadelic. George used to have a Cuban percussionist. The Cuban was all around in that time. It was all around.
Yes.
So it was doing that connection super deep before.
Eric moved to New Orleans in 2023 and released his second album, El Alimento, with features from artists he had idolized, like George Clinton and Chucho Valdez. And outside of the studio, the people are co-signing him too. Just like in Havana, his live shows in New Orleans are big dance parties for the body and soul.
You can be any color, any religion, anything. When the group gets you, at some point, when the group that's physical. You cannot
Yes.
you cannot control that. That go beyond of your knowledge. When the group beat your body, you're gonna just have to deal with yourself and, and let it go.
Cimafunk's latest album is called Pa Tu Cuerpa, and it's out now wherever you get your music. This episode of Movement was produced by Isabel Hibbard and myself, Maclit Hadero. Our senior editor is Megan Tan. Our sound designer and co-founder is Ian Koss. Our co-creator and podcast godmother is Julie Kane. Our broadcast partner is The World, and we are distributed by PRX.
Yo suave resolviendo y tú perdiendo tu tiempo en brete. El ambiente lo tienes caliente y tú sigues pegado a lo que hace la gente. No te preocupes más si yo voy, yo vengo, si yo traigo saco, si me falto tengo. La única manera de yo hacerte caso es que te inventes algo rico como esto. Te duele que yo ande en mi salsa, tírate una pastilla a ver si se te pasa. Con mi dinero.
From PRX.